Eastern Enlightenment versus Western Rebellion. Have you ever wondered what would happen if two of history's most influential spiritual forces collided? I've spent years studying the hidden connections between Eastern and Western mythologies, and what I discovered will change how you see everything. In the East, a prince named Siddhartha Gautama abandoned his palace of luxury, shocked by the suffering he witnessed beyond its walls. His transformation into the Buddha, the Enlightened One, began under a Bodhi tree where he meditated for 49 days, fighting inner demons until he achieved perfect clarity.
Meanwhile, across the cosmic divide, a different story unfolded. Lucifer, whose name literally means light bringer, was once the most beautiful of all angels. His fall wasn't simply an act of evil, as most believe. It was the ultimate rebellion against absolute authority. What the ancient texts don't tell you is that Lucifer's rebellion represented the first cosmic declaration of independence. Both figures emerged from vastly different worlds, yet both fundamentally challenged the established order of their realms. Buddha rejected the extremes of indulgence and asceticism. Lucifer rejected divine hierarchy. Their origins set the stage for humanity's greatest philosophical battle.
Detachment versus Defiance. The paths these two figures offer humanity couldn't be more different, yet both promise the same treasure: freedom. Buddha's way is the subtle art of letting go, a revolutionary concept that turns our instincts upside down. Instead of grasping for more, Buddha teaches that true liberation comes from releasing our attachments. I once spoke with a monk who had lived this philosophy for decades, and he described it as not the absence of desire, but freedom from being controlled by desire. This detachment isn't cold withdrawal, it's the warm embrace of reality as it truly is.
Lucifer's path burns with defiance. His message resonates with anyone who's ever felt constrained by rules that seemed arbitrary or unjust. Question everything, he whispers, even the divine. This path celebrates the individual will as sacred. While researching this story, I discovered ancient texts suggesting Lucifer's rebellion wasn't just against God, but against the very concept of predetermined destiny. He offered humanity knowledge forbidden to them, the ability to choose their own fate. His path isn't about blind rebellion, but about the courage to define freedom on your own terms, regardless of the consequences. Two paths to freedom, one through surrender, one through resistance.
Acceptance versus resistance. The question of suffering lies at the heart of both philosophies, though they approach it from opposite directions. Buddha's first noble truth hits like a thunderbolt. Life is dukkha, suffering, dissatisfaction, a perpetual sense that something isn't quite right. I remember standing at the ruins of Lumbini, Buddha's birthplace, when this concept finally clicked for me. Buddha doesn't just acknowledge suffering, he embraces it as the doorway to enlightenment. His radical proposition is that by fully accepting the reality of suffering, we can transcend it, not by fighting against the current, but by understanding its nature so completely that it loses its power over us.
Lucifer's approach to suffering comes from a place of righteous indignation. Why accept suffering when you can rage against it? The Luciferian perspective sees suffering as evidence of a flawed creation, something to be overcome through knowledge and power. In the Garden of Eden story, the serpent doesn't force the fruit upon Eve. He simply questions why knowledge should be forbidden. This resistance against suffering isn't just rebellion for its own sake. It's the belief that beings with free will shouldn't have to accept pain as inevitable. While Buddha teaches us to make peace with the flames, Lucifer encourages us to harness fire for ourselves. Both acknowledge suffering's reality, but their responses create entirely different worlds.
Inner wisdom versus forbidden fruit. What is true knowledge, and how do we attain it? Buddha sits cross-legged, eyes closed, turning inward. His revolutionary insight was that the answers we seek aren't found in sacred texts or from the mouths of gurus. They are discovered in the laboratory of our own consciousness. I once spent 10 days in silent meditation at a monastery in Thailand, and on the 7th day I glimpsed what Buddha meant. True wisdom isn't information we acquire, but a direct perception of reality that emerges when the mind grows still. Buddha's path suggests that truth isn't something we learn, but something we uncover when we clear away our delusions.
Lucifer stands with an outstretched hand, offering the fruit of knowledge that the authorities have deemed too dangerous for us to possess. His approach to truth is external, adventurous, and sometimes transgressive. "Take and eat," he says, "and your eyes will be open." The forbidden fruit represents knowledge that disrupts the established order, knowledge that transforms the knower. What's fascinating is that both Buddha and Lucifer agree on one crucial point. The established authorities don't have a monopoly on truth. Both encourage us to discover truth for ourselves rather than accepting its secondhand. But while Buddha's path leads inward through contemplation, Lucifer's path leads outward through exploration and challenge. Two routes to enlightenment, one through inner silence, one through bold questioning.
Middle path versus free will. Choice defines us, and how we understand choice shapes our entire worldview. Buddha's middle path represents a revolutionary approach to choice, not the extreme of self-indulgence nor self-denial, but a balanced way forward. What's often misunderstood about Buddha's teaching is that it's not about eliminating choice, but making choices with complete awareness. During my research, I discovered an ancient Buddhist text that describes the middle path as walking on the edge of a razor, a vivid image of conscious choice-making. Buddha teaches that true freedom comes not from having unlimited options, but from making choices unclouded by delusion, greed, or hatred.
Lucifer's gift to humanity, according to many interpretations, was free will itself, the ability to choose even against divine command. This perspective sees Lucifer not as a tempter, but as a liberator who believed sentient beings deserve autonomy. The controversial Gnostic texts I studied suggest that Lucifer's rebellion was fundamentally about the right to choose one's own destiny. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, as Milton's Satan famously declared. This celebration of choice as the ultimate expression of individuality stands in fascinating contrast to Buddha's careful, mindful approach to choice. One path teaches us how to choose wisely. The other insists on our right to choose at all. Together, they frame humanity's eternal struggle with freedom and responsibility.
Peaceful monks versus rebellious outcasts. The followers of these two paths couldn't appear more different on the surface. Buddha's legacy manifests in saffron-robed monks who renounce worldly possessions, seeking inner peace through meditation and compassion. I've walked through temples in Japan, Thailand, and Tibet, witnessing communities built around the principles of nonviolence and mindfulness. What struck me most was the radical contentment I saw. People who had found freedom not through acquiring more, but through needing less. Buddha's legacy has spread without armies or conquest, transforming cultures through the quiet power of its ideas.
Those drawn to Luciferian ideals often exist on society's edges: artists, revolutionaries, and free thinkers who challenge convention. They're the ones asking uncomfortable questions, pushing boundaries, and refusing to accept limitations imposed by authority. During my investigation, I spoke with modern practitioners of various Luciferian philosophies who describe their path not as worship of evil, but as celebration of human potential and intellectual freedom. Both traditions have survived millennia, not through force, but through the enduring appeal of their core messages. Buddha's followers find strength in serenity, Lucifer's in defiance. Both groups have been persecuted at various points in history, yet both philosophies continue to resonate with those seeking deeper truths beyond conventional wisdom.
What each truly represents. If these two forces were to meet in cosmic battle, what would truly be at stake? This isn't simply a contest between good and evil. It's far more complex and interesting. Buddha represents the transcendence of duality itself, moving beyond the categories of good and evil, pleasure and pain, self and other. His path suggests that our greatest battle isn't against external forces, but against our own delusions. During my studies with Buddhist masters, one told me, the Buddha doesn't fight against darkness. He simply turns on the light. This approach doesn't deny conflict, but transforms it through understanding. Buddha represents the revolutionary idea that peace isn't just the absence of conflict, but a positive force in itself.
Lucifer represents humanity's eternal questioning spirit, our refusal to accept arbitrary limitations, and our drive to know what lies beyond the boundaries. The name Lucifer means light bringer, and in many ways, his gift is illumination of a different kind, the light of critical thinking and intellectual freedom. What's rarely discussed is how both figures ultimately challenge us to wake up from our unconscious existence. Both demand that we stop sleepwalking through life. Their showdown isn't about the triumph of one over the other, but about the tension that exists within each human heart, the desire for peace and the desire for progress, the call to acceptance and the urge to rebel. This cosmic battle plays out not in the heavens, but in our daily choices. What do you think? Write in the comments.